My name is Karina, and at 29 years old, I still remember the moment like it was yesterday. The email pinged on my phone. Subject line, congratulations. It wasn't just any offer, it was the offer, $600,000 a year at Blackstone Financial. A dream job. My heart raced as I stared at the words, unable to process the reality of it. For years, I'd scraped by, working 2 jobs, paying bills, and cutting corners just to stay afloat. The thought that this kind of opportunity was finally mine felt surreal. I stood in my tiny apartment, gripping my phone tightly. The weight of it all, finally, the payoff for every late night, every missed meal, every sacrifice. I was finally going to be able to take care of myself, breathe without the constant stress of juggling bills. The first thing I did was call my family. I couldn't wait to share the news with my dad, who had always told me, keep pushing, keep going, one day it'll pay off. But when I told him, the joy I had felt quickly turned to confusion. That's great, Karina, but now you have to help us, he said, his voice steady. 55% of your salary for the family, and 35% for your brother's mechanic shop. No excuses. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My heart sank into my stomach. My father, the man who had always insisted that family was everything, was now telling me that everything I worked for belonged to them. I froze. Was this really happening? I had always given. But this felt different. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. I couldn't shake my father's words. 55% for us, 35% for your brother, he'd said, like it was the most reasonable request in the world. His voice, always so sure of itself, never wavered. It was as though he believed it was my duty, no, my obligation, to give everything I had worked for. He didn't even pause to consider my excitement, my relief, my chance to finally breathe easy. You know, we raised you, Karina, he continued, the tone of authority never faltering. You were given everything. Now it's your turn to take care of the family. My heart raced as I sat down, struggling to comprehend what he was asking. How could he think this was acceptable? He'd never worked a full day in his life, never understood the value of the hours I spent grinding away at multiple jobs just to stay afloat. I had spent years supporting them, paying bills I shouldn't have had to, and now this was his response to my success. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I had earned this, that my life was mine now. But when I looked at him, his weathered face, his tired eyes, I felt the familiar weight of obligation that had always kept me in check. He was my father, after all. My mind raced, but all I could manage was a strained, I can't just give you that much, Dad. He didn't hesitate. You'll manage. You don't need to live on that much. What matters is the family. Your brother's shop is struggling and we need the support. We raised you. We gave you a roof over your head. Now it's time to pay us back. I felt trapped, suffocated by his words. My dream job, the one thing I'd worked for all these years, was suddenly tainted by a demand that nearly wiped out everything I had. I tried to hold my ground, but my resolve wavered under the weight of his expectations. Could I really turn my back on them? Could I really refuse when they had raised me? When they had always been my family? My hand shook as I hung up the phone. What was I supposed to do now? At first, I laughed it off. I thought maybe my dad had lost his mind for a moment, or that he was just trying to test me. Surely he didn't mean it. But then the calls kept coming. The text messages, my mother's soft voice asking when I could send the next payment for the utility bills. My brother Mark casually mentioning how his mechanic shop was struggling, almost as if it were a given that I'd help. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself it wasn't as serious as it seemed, but every conversation, every demand chipped away at my resolve. My father's voice grew more insistent, more entitled. You've always helped, Karina. We need you now more than ever. It wasn't just a request. It was a demand wrapped in guilt, and I was supposed to be the one to bear it all. Mark called one evening, his tone just the right amount of pleading. Sis, I'm in a tight spot. The shop's not doing well, and I'm behind on a few bills. Can you help out just for a little while? He didn't even hesitate to mention the sum he expected me to cover, the business expenses for a few months, the same way I'd been paying for the house, for the utilities, for everything else. It wasn't even a question anymore. They were just assuming I would. That was the final straw. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling the weight of their dependence on me suffocating me. I had been the safety net for so long, but it was clear now that I wasn't just helping them. I was enabling them. I was losing myself in the process, drained by their constant demands, by their expectation that I would always be the one to fix everything. That night, I packed my things. I had spent years trying to build a life for myself, and it felt like I was throwing it all away for the same people who'd never once asked what I needed. As I packed up my apartment, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the years I had sacrificed, about the pieces of myself I had given up. But as I closed the door behind me, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to reclaim control, even if it meant letting go of everything that had tied me to them. It was time to choose myself. The first few days felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. For the first time in years, I had my full salary to myself. I didn't have to think twice before buying what I wanted. Whether it was a decent meal at a nice restaurant or a brand new pair of shoes I'd always eyed but couldn't afford. I joined a gym, something I had put off for so long because I couldn't justify the cost. I even took a trip to the local spa, something so simple yet so luxurious. The feeling of having money, and more importantly, having control over it, was a freedom I hadn't known in so long. I was finally able to breathe without the constant pressure of bills piling up, without the nagging feeling that I was just a bank account to my family. But that freedom didn't come without its price. It started with a single text from my father, the words carefully chosen, designed to guilt-trip me into submission. "Karina, we've always been here for you. Why can't you help us now?" It was followed by dozens more, each one more desperate, more accusatory. "Your brother is struggling," my mother wrote, "and you can't just leave us like this." At first, I ignored them. I needed space. I needed time to enjoy what I had worked so hard for. But as the days passed, the texts kept coming, followed by endless calls. My father's voice on the other end of the line grew more insistent with each conversation, a mix of frustration and sadness. "How could you do this to your family, Karina?" My brother Mark didn't waste any time either. "This is selfish," he texted. "You were always there for us before. Why now? Why are you abandoning us?" The guilt gnawed at me like a constant hum in the back of my mind. It was hard to ignore, especially when I could hear their hurt in every message, every call. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was betraying them. Even though I knew in my heart I was doing what was right for me, the freedom was mine. But at what cost? Would I ever be able to truly enjoy it without wondering if I had made the right decision? The first legal letter arrived in the mail a week after I stopped paying the bills. It was a formal notice, thick with legal jargon and the kind of cold authority that made my stomach twist. My father was suing me for filial abandonment, claiming I had neglected my family's needs and that, as his child, I was legally obligated to provide for them. He demanded that I pay a substantial sum in support and threatened further legal action if I didn't comply. I couldn't believe it. This was a man who had spent his entire life avoiding responsibility, yet here he was trying to make me pay for his and the family's failures. My hands trembled as I read the letter, the audacity of it taking a moment to settle in. I wasn't just facing a family dispute anymore. I was being dragged into a legal battle that I hadn't anticipated. The weight of it all hit me that afternoon. How had it come to this? How had the people I had always tried to help, the ones I had sacrificed everything for, turned against me like this? I knew I couldn't face this alone. I reached out to a family law attorney, a woman named Claire, who had handled cases like mine before. When I explained the situation, Claire listened quietly, taking notes, her face unreadable. "This isn't just about family dynamics," she said, her tone firm. "There's more at play here. Karina, your father's claims are not just emotional, they're financial." That's when it all started to unravel. Claire helped me dig into my father's financial history, and what we found sent a chill down my spine. There were hidden assets, money moved between accounts without my knowledge, and debts he had never disclosed. It became clear that my father had been manipulating not just me, but the entire family for years. The trust fund, the money he had claimed to use for my mother's medical bills, none of it had gone where it was supposed to. It was all a lie. I was furious. But at the same time, a weight lifted. I wasn't just being wronged by a family member. I was being deceived by a man who had hidden the truth from all of us. This was bigger than I thought, and I was no longer just defending myself. I was preparing to fight back. I hadn't expected it, but the more Claire and I dug, the deeper the web of lies became. We poured through every financial document we could find, bank statements, tax records, old files, anything that might give us a glimpse of the truth. And then we found a dusty, yellowed envelope tucked deep in one of my mother's old filing cabinets. It was labeled with her handwriting, Trust Fund, Medical Expenses. My heart skipped a beat as I opened the envelope, my hands trembling. Inside was a document detailing a trust fund my grandmother had set up for my mother, meant to cover medical costs, $250,000. It was supposed to help with my mother's treatment after her cancer diagnosis, to provide a cushion for her final months. But as I scanned the document, something didn't feel right. The trustee, my father, had signed a document dissolving the trust just 3 days after my mother's funeral. The money, instead of being used to ease her suffering or help with the medical bills, had disappeared into thin air. I read it again, hoping I was mistaken, but I wasn't. He had used that money for his own purposes, for his business ventures, while we struggled to make ends meet. The very money that could have lifted so much of the burden I had carried for years, gone. The reality of it hits me like a punch to the gut. My father, the man I had respected, had turned out to be nothing more than a liar, a man driven by his own greed, hiding behind the illusion of caring for his family. For years, I had been paying off debts, working myself to the bone, thinking I was helping them with their struggles. All along, he had known there was money waiting for us, money that could have saved us from financial ruin, could have kept me from sacrificing my own future. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. My father's actions shattered any semblance of trust I had left in him. He hadn't just let me down. He had deliberately deceived me, hiding the truth to maintain control over me. I felt nauseous, betrayed in a way I hadn't thought possible. This wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was about the money, the lies, and the years of manipulation I had endured. The weight of the truth was suffocating. But now that I knew, I couldn't ignore it. It was time to confront him. The anger I felt was no longer just a passing storm. It had become a driving force. I couldn't let my father get away with this, with all the years of manipulation and deceit. I had given so much of myself. And now, knowing what I did, I wasn't about to back down. I called Claire first thing the next morning. It's time to fight back, I told her, my voice steady but resolute. I'm countersuing. This isn't just about the trust fund. It's about everything he's done to us. With Claire's guidance, I hired a lawyer who specialized in fraud and embezzlement cases. Her name was Allison, and she had the kind of no-nonsense approach I needed. She immediately set to work on gathering evidence, pulling every financial document we could find to build a case against my father. As we sifted through records, more skeletons began to fall from the closet. My mother's old attorney, a man named Robert, had kept a detailed log of her affairs, and when I reached out to him, he agreed to help. Robert had been in charge of managing my mother's estate, and he had kept every document with painstaking care. What we uncovered was shocking. My father had made multiple fraudulent transfers, funneling money from accounts that should have been used for our family's well-being. There were unpaid debts from years ago that he had ignored, all the while presenting himself as a responsible patriarch. And then there was the trust fund, $250,000 that could have covered years of expenses, medical bills, and supported me while I built my life, gone. I felt the power shifting back into my hands. The moment I saw the fraudulent transfers and unpaid debts, I realized how much control he had taken from me. But now I was reclaiming it. My life, my future, finally in my own hands. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about righting the wrongs, about taking back what was mine. I wasn't going to let my father use his manipulation and greed to destroy what I had worked for. I had done enough for them. Now it was time for them to face the consequences. As I looked at the stack of documents in front of me, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was only the beginning. The moment the court ruled in my favor, it felt like a floodgate opened. My father's carefully constructed world of lies and manipulation began to unravel piece by piece. The evidence of his fraudulent activities was irrefutable, and soon it became clear to everyone his business was on the brink of collapse. His debts piled up, and creditors started knocking on doors he could no longer avoid. The mechanic shop that had once been the family's supposed lifeline began to fall apart, unable to recover from the financial mismanagement he had allowed. I watched it all from a distance, the rapid disintegration of everything I had once thought was stable. The business he had clung to so tightly was no longer his salvation. It was his downfall. His shame was public now, and the community that had once respected him began to turn their backs. I could almost feel his desperation through the phone when he called to plead for help, but I remained silent, letting the consequences of his own actions wash over him. Meanwhile, my own life was shifting in ways I hadn't anticipated. At work, the promotion I had long dreamed of came through. I was recognized for my hard work, for the diligence and integrity I had put into my career. My salary increased, and the recognition felt like a victory. Not just for me, but for the woman I had become, the woman who refused to be manipulated any longer. My office became my sanctuary, the place where I could finally breathe, free from the constant weight of my family's expectations. But as much as my career flourished, something inside me ached. Watching my father's downfall, the collapse of the family that I had once tried to protect, was harder than I had imagined. The truth had come out, and with it, everything I had once known about them crumbled. My father, my brother, the family I had fought so hard for, they were gone. And yet the silence that followed felt oddly liberating. I had the money now, the $250,000 from the trust fund, the money my father had stolen from my mother and from me. With it, I made the decision to buy back the family home from foreclosure. The house that had once symbolized family unity, where we had all gathered for holidays, for birthdays, for moments of fleeting joy, now belonged to me. But it wasn't just about reclaiming property. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine and my mother's. When the documents were signed, I felt a strange sense of calm. The home was no longer a place tied to past sacrifices, to the weight of responsibilities I never signed up for. It had become something else, a symbol of my mother's legacy, a reminder of everything I had fought for. The eviction notice was served shortly after. My father and brother had no choice but to leave. Watching them pack up their things was like watching the last of the facade crumble. I didn't feel satisfaction, nor did I feel guilt. I simply felt nothing. They had pushed me to this point. Their greed and manipulation had created a chasm that was now impossible to bridge. As they walked away, their faces blank with defeat, I stood firm in my decision. I wasn't going to be dragged back into their web of deceit. My actions had sent shockwaves through the family, a ripple effect that would change everything for them. But for me, it was the closure I had needed. The family I had once tried so desperately to protect was gone, and in their place, I was left standing alone, finally free to rebuild the life I had put on hold for too long. The house no longer felt like my family's. It felt like mine. The walls, once heavy with memories of sacrifices, now stood as a symbol of a new beginning. I decided to rent the property out, not to another family who would abuse it, but to a young couple looking for a fresh start. They had a child on the way, and I could sense their hope, their excitement about creating a home. It was exactly what the house needed, a family that could truly build something from it, not destroy it. As I handed over the keys to them, I felt a sense of peace. The house was no longer a symbol of all I had given up. It had become a place where a real family could thrive, one built on love, not obligation. My mother's legacy, once tainted by my father's greed, was finally free. I had made the right choice. I reflected on the transformation, not just of the house, but of myself. I had let go of the need to be everything for everyone else. I wasn't the woman who would sacrifice herself any longer. I had learned the hard way to live for myself, to take control of my own destiny. The pain of the past still lingered, but it didn't control me. I had rebuilt what had been broken. And now, with the house rented and my future in my hands, I could finally breathe. For so long, I had been told that family meant sacrifice, that love meant giving until there was nothing left. But I had learned the truth. Family should never mean losing yourself. Love should never mean erasing who you are. It had taken years of struggle, years of being drained dry, to finally realize it. And while I wished the lesson had come sooner, I was grateful it had come at all. As I walked through the city one evening, the sun setting behind tall glass buildings, I felt the weight of freedom in every step. The old Karina, the one who had bowed under the weight of obligation, who had sacrificed her dreams for others, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again allow herself to be manipulated. I thought of my mother then, of the woman who had endured so much, who had deserved better, and I knew she would be proud of me. Proud that I had fought back, that I had reclaimed what was hers, that I had broken the cycle of sacrifice and silence. That night, as I sat in my apartment, I allowed myself to dream again. Real dreams. Not just about survival, not just about making it to the next paycheck. Dreams about travel, about love, about building a future entirely my own. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The battles I had fought had scarred me, but they had also shaped me. They had taught me that strength isn't found in sacrifice alone, but in knowing when to say no, when to draw the line, when to choose yourself. And so, with the city lights flickering outside my window, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. Never again. Never again would I let someone else dictate my worth. Never again would I sacrifice myself for people who only saw me as a lifeline. Never again would I let guilt chain me to a life that wasn't mine. I had chosen myself, and for the first time, that was enough.